Okay. Well, welcome to the Indigenous Entrepreneurs Podcast. Today I have Mary Ben with me. She is co-owner of Bidii Baby Foods, who you've heard from her partner Zach on various episodes about their business. And I asked Mary to come on with me today to talk specifically about grants because I know that's a topic that people are really interested in learning more about. And Mary's done a lot of grant work for Biddy Baby Foods, so I wanted to pick her brain on this topic. So if you could just introduce yourself, Mary, and then we'll get into the discussion.
Sure, Cecilia, thanks for having me. Like you had mentioned, I'm the co-founder of Bidii Baby Foods. I'm also the director of the Ben Initiative, which is our nonprofit arm. And our organization was established in 2022 to support other kind of beginner Indigenous farmers, as well as those working in birth work and nutrition.
So you guys, what year did you guys start Biddy Baby Foods in? Was it 2019, 2020? I can't remember.
Yeah, so we started Bidii Baby Foods in the pandemic, but we formalized and registered our business in 2021. And I think, Zach has probably mentioned in previous podcasts, um, we started when we started in 2021, we farm on tribal trust land, and that land is unique in a lot of ways, but there can be extra barriers, I guess, to accessing capital when you farm on tribal trust land. The US government technically owns the land, it's leased to you. And so you can't use that land as collateral or as an asset to try to get a loan or a line of credit in most cases. So we had to sort of think creatively in terms of how we were going to just operate and scale our farm as our demand increased and increased over the years. And so that's what I'd love to share a little bit more about today are those the paths that we took that maybe another native farmer or it's kind of socially driven business that's operating on tribal lands, that maybe some other access to capital options for you in the form of grants.
Can you walk me through just a little bit of the journey of what it looked like, I guess, initially starting Biddy Baby Foods, trying to access capital, some of the barriers you ran into, and then some of the creative ways that you figured out how to access capital to kind of move around those barriers that you're experiencing?
Yeah, so to backtrack a little bit to kind of our origin story, Zach and I found out we were pregnant right when the pandemic hit, and we had been farming together already, but we decided, at least for kind of on a subsistence level for our own family, that was a scary time, and we wanted to make sure that our child was going to be secure, at least with food access. And it was important to us to grow and preserve all of the crops that we grew that year on our plot so that they're shelf stable throughout that time. So that was kind of our main motivator was to feed our son and our family throughout a really chaotic food insecure moment in history. And in the process of doing that, we had an abundance that year, and we sold at local farmers markets and got a lot of positive feedback saying that this really needs to be a thing. So this was really community motivated from the beginning, first with us, then with community, and then as we started to expand our plot. We had started on a 4-acre plot, moved and did about 6 acres and then 10 acres, now 16 acres, and probably 30 or 40 acres next year. Every year we seem to be able to do more and more, which is great. But that's also definitely because of the access to capital that needs to go alongside of that growth. But yeah, so we started to expand in 2021, which is when we formalized our business. And we thought, we registered domestically as a for-profit LLC with the tribe. Um, Truthfully, we haven't really received a lot of support or financial support from the tribe. And we had certain benefits of registering domestically, specifically like sales taxes that are there's a tax exemption for um, traditional food producers, or if you're selling fresh produce, those foods are you can remove sales tax under the Navajo Nation junk food tax, or the Healthy Nation Act is what it's called. So that was sort of the perk that we were looking at, and thought, we would get access to capital through the tribe being a tribal farm, and that didn't really happen that way. We knew that our community really wanted it. We knew that there were a lot of nutritional and public health benefits to children having access to these foods in abundance, especially that 0 to 3 age range. The foods that you eat during that time frame really can help set a lifelong trajectory for the foods that you crave. It helps with establishing hunger cues and all of those things. So we knew we wanted to do it. We just didn't know how we would be able to access the capital to grow to meet this increasing demand. At that time, we started reaching out to potential grant opportunities or potential funders, and a lot of them said right off the bat, you're a for-profit LLC, you don't qualify for the grant. Or we also heard that you're a tribal business, and we as a donor haven't had a lot of success, or we've even had fraudulent activity with grants and donations we've given out to tribal organizations. And so we obviously had certain feelings about that, and I still feel like um, those assumptions were wrong and inequitable. But we've kind of felt like we either need to play into the system to get what we need or not. And so at that point, we decided to establish our own 501(c)(3) nonprofit organization. We went back and forth a lot whether we should um, obtain a fiscal sponsor to do this work, and there was a couple of things that played into our decision to not use a fiscal sponsor but to be our own 501(c)(3) organization. And that was our experience in the past with working with a lot of border town nonprofits that kind of have some predatory practices. Maybe they're charging 15-20% overhead to manage your grants for you, or they are not steering you in the right direction in terms of like sticking to your mission. There can be some mission drift that way. And we knew that long term, all other, young Indigenous farmers in our area were going to face the same problem. They were also going to need fiscal sponsors to be able to grow their food businesses. So we really thought that we could be that primary fiscal agent for ourselves as Bidii Baby Foods, but also for other young farmers that we were seeking to grow with and even to mentor. So we went ahead in 2022 and formalized a 501(c)(3) nonprofit organization, and that was really like the kickoff. Having your own 501(c)(3) really allows you to qualify for and apply for many, many more grants than you would be able to as an LLC. So that's sort of the direction that we went in. And from that point, over the last 2 years, we've been able to, for ourselves, for a local charter school, for local chapter houses, and for independent farmers, we've been able to hold about $1 million in grants over the last 2 years to build up these various projects.
So, so you established the Ben Initiative, which is your nonprofit, in 2022,
Mhm.
and for the past 2 years, you've been able to utilize grants to support your business and like forward your mission. What has that looked like? Like, how have you been able to use the for-profit and then the nonprofit in tandem to um, build your business, but also like what do the behind the scenes look like with
Yeah.
like grant applications and management of grants while like running a business? Like, can you kind of share what that has looked like and what you guys have had to like keep in mind or really focus on the past 2 years?
Sure. Yeah. No. And so as as a business that sort of has this like hybrid model, right? Like we have the for-profit LLC, and Zach is the sole owner of that, and we don't have any shareholders. So I think there's kind of a misunderstanding that because you're a for-profit, all the profits go to, the people at the top, and you're just making money and making money. An LLC can also operate as a not for profit because we don't take profits and share them among shareholders, or it doesn't, go into like a big bonus at the end of the year. Everything that we make off of the nonprofit is still put back into the farm and into the programming of what we're doing. So we sort of have a break even model every year on the LLC side. Um, However, grants can be very specific and also very limited in terms of what they can pay for. Every grant has a list of allowable expenses and inallowable expenses. So we are able to use our LLC to, the from the sales that we make every year from our fresh crops and then our value added products. Just this year in 2024, we're kind of breaking that six-figure mark in sales. And the sales revenue we've been able to generate allows us to buy the things that are very difficult to buy with grants. So we've mostly used that to purchase like implements for our tractor and irrigation infrastructure and yeah, a lot of like equipment. Heavy equipment is one of the harder things to get covered with grants. Purchasing a tractor, tractor implements, things like that for a farm business. Those are like really hard to come by. So we've been able to kind of use our sales revenue to move in that way and keep our equipment coming in, the equipment that we need, and keep it maintained. And then on the grant side, we've been able to use either federal, state, or private foundations to support our personnel costs to really mostly like do the programming that we feel like we need as both, as a socially driven business. For us, it's not just about creating products and selling those to the community. We recognize with the historical trauma and really present day trauma that's in our community, there's a lot of reconnecting people to foods. That's and it's important work for us, like heart work for us, but we feel like it's also important for our business that we make sure that we use our farm to provide land-based learning opportunities. So that could look like volunteers coming out or bringing school classrooms out for students to engage in the farm, or like farm to table cooking classes. We have 2 or 3 of those every year to make sure that community is feeling connected and informing the work that we're doing. And then second to that, in terms of like our growth, I think I've said a few times now that we have really high demand that we can't actually keep up with at this point in time. So each season we're really having to think and prioritize like where do we want the majority of our crops to go. And for the last 2 years, we've about 80% of our sales have gone to schools and childcare programs and food banks because it's important to us that our community has access to them, but most people can't afford them. So we got farm to school certified. We have our manufacturing permit so that we could sell to these institutional markets without it having to be a direct cost to the family. Um, but really thinking long term, we would love to be able to prioritize those sales, but we have a lot of retail markets reaching out to us, like Bash's and La Montanita Co-op, a lot of like New Mexico or Navajo-based retailers that want our products in the stores. We just can't keep up with it, and our vision for growth in that capacity is to have what we call the farmer in residence program, like a farmer incubator program where we identify young, under age 30 indigenous farmers who want to grow the ingredients that we need to make our baby foods and other traditional food products, that we could, through our program, we can train them on the food safety and like the traditional farming methods, and get them farm to school certified so that they can, if they want to either sell directly to us so that we can continue to aggregate and make more and more products, and they can make what they need to make is on the farming side, they can do that, or they can kind of help utilize the nonprofit that we've built as a fiscal agent for them so that we can assist them with grant writing, help them get on their feet the same way that we did for ourselves as a food business, and they can make their own products and their own brand and start that entrepreneurial journey. So yeah, so to circle back to the question that you asked, like when we're looking for grants, we're looking for grants that will specifically cover some of the land-based learning opportunities, the costs to bring people out to the farm and help them engage, and the costs to run our farmer in residence program. So that can be like stipends, shared equipment, costs for like training and certifications for them, and cost for our own, like myself and our other staff members, to help provide that technical assistance to them so that they can start that entrepreneurship journey.
I think you guys have created a really innovative and exemplary model of like what's possible for businesses, especially res-based businesses who want to grow but also want to have this social impact. I've spoken with a lot of Indigenous entrepreneurs who they have their for-profit business, but they have like this idea of how they can impact their community, but they just don't know how to go about it. And I think you guys bring a very unique and innovative solution to kind of how to do that, with the for-profit and nonprofit, kind of working together to accomplish this like greater social impact goal. Um, for those businesses who like have that desire to serve their community and already have a for-profit business that they're running, what are some things that they should consider if they want to kind of go on this Bidii Baby Foods route that you guys have been on? What are some key things that they need to think about and keep in mind, especially when it comes to running a nonprofit, applying for grants? What should they know before they kind of dive into that world?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think um, there's a big difference between an LLC and a nonprofit and how they operate. Zach and I completely divvy up responsibilities for that. Like I said, he's the sole owner of Bidii Baby Foods, and he manages all of the reporting and taxes and HR and everything on that side. And I fully do the nonprofit side with a board of directors. Um, yeah, they're definitely very different. It would require a lot of learning. And I know that like in our region, for example, San Juan College has like a nonprofit management board development class that you can take, even not as an enrolled full-time student, but just if you're interested in creating an organization like that, because there's just a lot that goes into it. Um, Fiscal sponsorship might be a good way to ease into it, at least maybe for like a year. You can still reach out to, there's a number of organizations throughout the state that offer like year-to-year fiscal sponsorship. That way they can provide you, not only can they like hold money for you if you did want to apply for a grant and implement a project with that money, but they can also provide that like technical assistance and training to get you to where you need to be to understand the complexities of running your own nonprofit. Um, and then, you know, it's not completely impossible to get a grant as an LLC, and especially if you have that 501(c)(3) fiscal agent, fiscal sponsor, you can still do that. It's just it really depends on like the line of work that you're in. um, a good example, like, you see our business and it's very clear from the beginning. We're farmers, we're trying to increase food access, we're trying to address like early childhood nutrition, and it's kind of ties into, it's not just agriculture, it's public health, it's entrepreneurship. We can kind of access money in a lot of different funding streams because it's very intersectional work. But we've had people come up to us and ask, for example, someone who's in construction and like wants to, this person I'm thinking of in particular is Navajo and has an interest in building like really culturally relevant homes across the Navajo Nation on tribal trust land, the same challenges that we're dealing with, like trying to build farming and infrastructure on tribal land, and has a really innovative like model and wants to mentor like other young folks that like want to be in real estate or want to be in construction, and is having a hard time like accessing capital to do that. And I think people get deterred a lot because if you're in like a line of work like that where it just looks like construction, it doesn't look also like cultural preservation or like mentorship, entrepreneurship. You have to sort of think creatively. Like, yes, my main goal is to like build more homes for my people, but in doing that, I also want to make sure these homes are like we're preserving some cultural building practices or where I'm able to teach other people alongside me while I'm doing this work. That line of thinking can open up grant opportunities for you where you could look to your tribal nation or you can look to your state like economic development offices, or cultural preservation work, foundations that do work in that, in those areas, and put a proposal together and tell them like your greater vision for how you see this work coming together, and that can open up some grant opportunities for you. Once you can sort of think, okay, maybe I got a fiscal sponsorship, maybe I'm ready and I've got my 501(c)(3) status. Now I'm thinking creatively about how I can really showcase the bigger vision for my work and I can access some of these grants. Then it comes down to like the grant management because I don't know, in my work, I feel like there's a big push in entrepreneurship for entrepreneurs to access loans and that somehow accessing loans makes you more accountable or something. Like I think there's a stigma around grants sometimes that this is like money that's given away. But grants are a lot of work. They're very competitive to get. Oftentimes, there's hundreds of people vying for the same grant, and there's only a handful of people that get selected. So they're very competitive. To get them, you have to be like very organized. You have to have strong writing skills and communication skills, and then just like project management skills. Once you receive the grants, it takes a lot of effort to make sure that you're meeting those project deliverables in a timely manner, that you are doing all of the project reporting as well as like financial reporting. And that can often take like a full-time position within itself just to do that work. And these grants are being given out to communities because they understand oftentimes the inequities that various parts of our state or tribal communities or entrepreneurs are facing. And they feel like having access to this money is what's going to get you that leg up to be able to have that continued community impact. So I don't see it at all as a handout. I think it's actually oftentimes way more work to receive and manage and implement a grant than it is to manage alone. So yeah, that's what I would say about that. Did you have any more specific questions about the project management side or?
Well, I am wondering, like if someone's listening and they're like, well, I have ideas, like what kind of businesses can use this model? Um, and like how can they, tell their story or like what kind of projects actually can be grant funded and where does it make sense, to apply for grants versus maybe just get a loan or just try to keep reinvesting your profits from your business back into your business. Like, when does it make sense to go after grants?
Right. Yeah, I mean, for us, we decided to go after it right away. We have never taken out a loan. We couldn't, even if we wanted to, because our land was on tribal trust and we didn't have anything to put up as collateral to even try to get a loan or a line of credit. So for us, it was from the beginning, right? You don't have to go into debt immediately to start a business. And it really does depend on what line of work you're in, but this is a perfect example of why tribal liaisons are the perfect people to tap into because they're going to know regionally where they meet with you what are the best, like what's the best starting point for you, and potential either like private foundations or donors or grants that are available within your state, tribe, or the federal government that you can utilize for that. So that's where I would start. If I was an entrepreneur hearing this, I would want to contact my, regional, like tribal liaison, or if you have like a school, we have San Juan College, most closest to us, that has like an enterprise center, I think is what they call it, where there's a group of other organizations like West or SBCG is I think is what the Small Business Development Office, where you can sort of go there and explain what your business model is, explain your bigger vision for how you want to engage and in more of this community work to uplift your community or uplift potential other entrepreneurs that you want to bring with you, and see what sort of like funding is available, because it really does like differ based on what line of work that you're in. But just broadly speaking, I like to think of grant funding opportunities in like four different categories. And I'd say starting from the easiest, going to the greatest level of difficulty, I would start with your local foundations, because those are the ones that are usually the easiest to apply for. You don't, it doesn't it's not like pages and pages and pages of questions. It's usually the grant application itself is easier to fill out. Oftentimes, they might even allow you to submit like videos or to have a phone call to like verbally explain if writing is challenging for you, that they're willing to like work with you in that way to get the communication in a different format. It doesn't have to be like written down in there. Um, and so community foundations, they're great because they're local to you. They understand the challenges in your community, and they have a set amount of funding aside every year to support various things that they're interested in. They're more willing to work with you to understand your application. However, they're also usually limited in the amount that they can give you. So community foundations are going to give probably, I'd say, less than six figures. I would say anywhere between like 5 or 10,000 on the lower end to like maybe 50. I haven't seen community foundations give much more than that. Um, you could look into like statewide or like nationwide foundations. So we've in our early on days, like our very first grant we ever received was from Save the Children, which is actually an international organization, but they have a US based branch, I guess, that focuses on giving grants within the United States. And so we were one of like a handful of organizations across the US that was funded for a food security grant. And that was like 100,000. So even the nationwide ones are kind of limited, right? Community foundations often will give you the money up front, knowing that you're strapped for cash most of the time. You need the cash flow to do your project, so they'll give the majority of the grant up front, and then once you complete everything, maybe there was a little bit outstanding that they'll send at the end. And so that can be really helpful too, like, getting cash flow going doesn't have to just be in the form of a loan. It can come in the form of grants. And if you just need, you know, 10, 20, 30,000 or something to get the equipment that you need to start your business or something like that could be a good option for you. Beyond that, if you're looking like us, where every year we're doing these land-based learning, we're hosting farmers and residents, we're building workforce that way, agricultural workforce, and this is going to be an annual thing for you. There can be grants that you look at the state level, or even within the tribal government, if you're based on a tribal nation, that can support workforce development activities that maybe if you're doing similar like public health work and land-based learning, maybe on the public health or nutrition side of things, you can look at your state or tribal departments to see if they have grants available for that. Typically, once you get outside of like your local foundations or private donors, you're looking at reimbursement-based grants. They're usually larger grants, larger amounts. These are six figures and beyond. But they're very much more complicated. You definitely have to turn in written grants in the confines of what they're asking for very specifically. The reporting is very, very detailed and rigid, and they're much more difficult to manage. So yeah, I guess the saying like more money, more problems, that's exactly it. Like the more money you're asking for, and if you go through, you know, the state or tribe or federal government where you're getting taxpayer dollars, the level of accountability just goes up. So this at that point, when you're getting money from your state or from your tribe or from the federal government, which is definitely the highest level of the highest amount of money you can get, but also the highest amount of reporting that's required to manage these grants, um, you're looking at like half-time or full-time positions just to manage these grants throughout the entire year because they're that complicated in terms of tracking the project to making sure you're on track, reporting those back on a quarterly or semi-annual basis, and doing all of your invoicing and financial reporting because these are reimbursement based, right? They're not going to give you the money up front. They might award you $200,000 for the year, but you're going to have to pay and upfront for those costs and report back either on a monthly or quarterly basis to get reimbursed for doing that work. So that's sort of my understanding of how I would categorize different grants. There's like, the private local foundations or statewide national foundations. Then beyond that, working with your state, tribe, and federal government to get grants from various like for us, it's USDA. But if you work in other lines of work, you would look at different sectors. But yeah, once you get involved in those sorts of grants, you need to have staff that are fully dedicated to implementing and managing them and reporting and invoicing. It's just it's a lot of work then. That's why I say it's not a handout at all. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, and it sounds like you just need to be really clear about like what is your goal? What is your capacity? Like what can you handle? Um, Maybe
Mhm.
having to work with a grant writer or, contract with someone to do that grant management. Um, it
Yeah.
probably would look different, like based like on a case by case basis, but like you said, it's not just a handout, especially when you get into like the state, tribe, and federal grants, it's a lot of work. So, if businesses
Mhm.
are like considering this model or just even considering applying for a grant, they need to keep all that in mind and really be mindful and intentional about like what they can handle. And again, like what is the purpose? Like, is it to buy equipment? Is there a bigger vision for this grant? If there's a bigger vision, then maybe investing the time and the personnel to go after those bigger grants might be worth it. But if it's just for like something like a need that your business has, probably those smaller grants make more sense. Um, One thing that I think you guys have been really good at is storytelling, as well as just the intentionality with like wh why are you applying for these grants? Like, what's the bigger goal and bigger purpose for your business? Um, can you talk a little bit about how you've leveraged grants to kind of accomplish and move towards the bigger goals that you have for Biddy Baby Foods?
Yeah, no. So when we first started, it was like I said, accessing the capital that we needed to get the equipment. Farming is a really cost heavy in the beginning. To scale up and produce what you need to produce it. We're still an organic operation, and we don't do any sort of industrial farming. But even when you're fully organic, you need a tractor, you need certain implements, you need machinery to safely process and clean and package all of your value added products. And so this is like hundreds of thousands of dollars of equipment right off the bat for a small family farm. We've put um, combining the costs from our business with like the grants we received under fiscal sponsorship, we've put like close to $900,000 into just the equipment and infrastructure for the first 3 years of operation. And we're just barely breaking, six figures in sales revenue this year. So, farming is really costly in the beginning. And not all businesses like have those same really intense costs up front for equipment. Um, but yeah, that's what we faced early on and what we focused our grant writing strategy to cover in the beginning was equipment and primarily shared equipment that we could purchase and share with our farmers and residents and share with other young farmers in the area. And so that's really where the storytelling comes in to make sure that, you raise the money, you purchase the equipment, and then you're not only able to showcase, like, you can clearly see that through our sales revenue and whatnot, that we are producing what we said we were going to produce, but also that we're able to show and document over time that we have allowed this many farmers to use this equipment and they've benefited in these ways, watch their story, see them grow, you know. Storytelling is definitely a very important part of it that you're going to have to do in a formal way when you get grants, that you're going to have to do this like written reporting and showcase like numbers and like records, for us, like sales records. But there's this greater, like socially driven impact that we're trying to showcase as well, that when we are able to use our business as a cooperative in this way and share equipment and have these community centered events, that's when we hit the sweet spot, right? So yeah, was there more that you wanted to touch on with that or?
Also, I know one thing that you guys have kind of been battling with this model is like the sustainability of the grants and like using them um, to support your business. How have you kind of like, what are some solutions regarding sustainability that you've started to either implement or brainstorm? Because it is, like you said, it is a lot of work to apply for grants and to rely on grants as part of your like income for your
Right.
business.
Yeah, and truthfully, in the beginning, these last like 2 years since we started the nonprofit side, it's been a lot of like applying for many of these like smaller foundation-based grants as well as like some state grants to get us off the ground. And now that we have access to all of the major equipment that we need, we're shifting to focus on just getting maybe like one or two larger federal grants to help run the programming, right? Like the farmer and residence program and the land-based learning that we offer to the community. And without having any debts or loans for the business side of things. Now we're breaking that six-figure mark. Within, like, I'd say 1 or 2 years, we're going to fully be able to just break even on our costs. We're not going to be in that debt cycle at all on the business side of things. Um, so if you really look at it, I'm not an economist. I am not going to like crunch the numbers. But I know that, farmers that farm on private land are pretty often stuck in a debt cycle where they purchase their land, they're making payments to pay off their land almost the entire time that they're farming on it. And they're farming, and in the best case scenario, they're breaking even every year. And at the end of their careers, the majority of farmers are, ideally like passing it down to families, their family members, if they want to take on a family business of farming. But if not, they have the land, the equity in the land to fall back on and retire with. And that's what a lot of farmers end up doing, is selling it for development, right? And that's kind of their retirement plan. And we can't do that. Um, so they might have taken out a loan to purchase the land. They're making payments on it every year, and they're selling their crops, and they're sort of like breaking even, maybe towards the end of their, their time farming on it. It's built up more equity over time, and they can sell that and retire on that. So um, we, however, have taken out no loans because we can't purchase the land that we're farming on, which is like a blessing and a curse at the same time, and really inequitable when you think about how tribal trust land is operated by the US government and the risks associated with that. But anyway, we did not take out a loan for that. We've been able to just use our own personal savings, sales revenue, and now, grants that we were awarded under fiscal sponsorship to eliminate those upfront costs for heavy equipment, for irrigation infrastructure, for processing equipment. And now that those are in place, just 4 years into our operation, now we're on that path to be profitable literally within the next like couple years. So within less than 10 years, we're able to start a brand new like agricultural business and have no debts and to be profitable and sustainable for the foreseeable future versus the majority of even American farmers on private land don't even have those good of prospects. So we've been able to kind of come up with I know Zach refers to the resonomics to navigate the challenges of not being able to own your land, but still be able to make a profitable agricultural business with the support of grants from local foundations, and our state and federal government that believe in what we're doing and also have specifically allocated money, understanding those inequities that I think the USDA refers to as marginalized farmers, meaning, Black, Indigenous, women farmers that have been excluded from those programs previously, that now there's kind of an abundance of programs specifically designed for that. So they're there, they recognize that we're starting from way behind from where a normal farmer on private land would start at. And that's what they're there for. They're there for us to take advantage of those programs and set ourselves up for a sustainable future.
And I think it's just really um admirable and just like a really good model that you guys have created because your goal is to eventually, be profitable enough to where you can use the profits to then go back into your business and then hopefully maybe even fund some of the other initiatives that you guys have. And I think it's just an important point to make to people that just because you start off using grants, um, use that to get your business to a point to where you don't need that anymore and you're sustaining yourself and supporting yourself. I think it's really inspirational and
Mhm.
the way um even like socially driven businesses can make an impact, without having to always be like writing grant proposals is eventually having that goal of like sustainability of your own business. And that's why I think the model that you guys have been using is so cool. So I just wanted to share that. Do you have any other like final thoughts or recommendations for people who might want to look into using grants for their business, like any final thoughts or pieces of advice, especially since a lot of Native businesses do have a socially driven aspect or socially driven
Mhm.
motivations behind their business.
Yeah, no, I think to kind of summarize it in my experience doing the work that we're doing, I think you're absolutely right. I think a lot of the majority that I've come into contact with, even if, the entrepreneur that I've met, like I said, is in construction or wants to do mechanic stuff, there's always seems with Native entrepreneurs to be this um, family focus or community focus that like they're inherently it's already being thought about that, yes, I want to build something that's going to help my community or my family, or I want to do mentorship, or I want to make sure these cultural pieces are preserved. It's always, even if it's not spoken, it just seems to be understood by Native entrepreneurs that that's like the path that they want their business to go down. And I think just with the clear economic inequities that exist from historical trauma, um, I just feel like it's important that Native entrepreneurs know that you're not being able to start on the same level as most, white entrepreneurs or folks that are kind of coming from families that have that leg up already. And that's exactly what grants are designed to do. It's to get you on that even playing field where um, most are not able to start out on. And so don't feel any kind of way that that grants are like a handout or that they themselves are not sustainable. That money is being allocated from our state and from tribal governments and from the federal government, recognizing those injustices and those inequities that have been created by the US government, right? Like, and so I feel like that's kind of the approach that we've taken with our work is knowing that we can look at the fact that like our the land we're farming on is we can't own it and it's a risk and it's inequitable and we can go around in circles about that all day, or we can recognize the system and see like, okay, we're not going to be able to access this as an LLC. Like, what do we need to do to get access to it? 501(c)(3). Okay, how can we then again use that for all native farmers in our area that are going to have the same problems and build our capacity to make sure that other people are not having to go through that same like process, right? Um, so yeah, I would say if you are listening to this podcast and you've considered grants, you don't know where to start, it's overwhelming, you've been told it's not sustainable or it's not a good option for your business, I would try to contact with, your local tribal liaison through the UNM Rainforest Innovations Program or through another, if you don't have access to a tribal liaison, through another like entrepreneurial program, like West is another good one in our state, to be able to kind of sit down and have these conversations and talk through all the different components of your current business, your future aspirations to be an entrepreneur, or really think through and get organized in terms of what is your business plan, your business concept, your mission, and how that applies more broadly. Because the more solidified you are in that thinking, the easier it's going to be for a tribal liaison or an entrepreneurial sort of like hub to help you think through what grants you would qualify for or what other access to capital might be good for you to start out on.
One thing I would add too is like be intentional with your growth and with your strategic plan
Mhm.
because I've seen the intentionality that's gone behind Bidii Baby Foods, planning and growth, and I think that's part of what's helped you be successful. So, um, just to any
Mhm.
businesses listening, intentionality is good and you don't have to grow fast. Like it's okay to grow slower and step by step and more intentionally. You'll most likely be better off in the long run if you keep that intentionality with what your main goal and purpose and your whole why of your business is. So,
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the more organized we've gotten over the last few years and very clear with what is our mission, what's our vision, and how are we achieving that, and being very clear, writing that down in a business plan. And we've, over time, when we first started out, the grants seemed to be very limited. It seemed like, oh, we could only qualify for these things, or we do qualify for this grant, but they want us to do X, Y, and Z as part of that. And that's not really part of our mission, but we have no choice but to take this right now. That kind of thinking really stretches you thin, and it could put you at risk for drifting away from your mission just to take money. And that might help you survive in that moment as an organization, but it's going to deter future grant makers or donors from investing in you if you seem to be all over the place. So really, yeah, taking that time, like Cecilia said, to be really intentional and decide like, okay, what is my mission? What's my skill set? Like, how am I gonna, what are my primary goals for the next year or the 2 years? Um, and the more clear you can get on that, the easier it's going to be for you to say no to things that don't fit within your mission. So that's kind of Zach and I joke this year was the year of no for us to say no to things, and not always say yes and not put ourselves at risk for like drifting away from our mission just to accept money. So we've been able to even put that in writing too, like to be able to decide like not only like these are our values that we put into grants that we show to donors, but also what are our values for donors and what are our absolute no's, things that we will not accept money for. So yeah, that's it's the best place to start. Get yourself organized, get very clear on what your mission is, and then try to reach out to a tribal liaison, someone that can understand where you're coming from and really understand those key components of what you're trying to do, and then connect you to potential grants and all that that entails, grant writers, other people that you're going to need to make that a reality. But yeah, that's what I'd say in
And
closing
if
thoughts.
it's not in line with your goals and your values, it's okay to say no. I think that's a
Yeah.
huge lesson. And so I'm glad you shared that.
Yeah. It's not just okay to say no, it's like essential to say no at
Hmm.
some point.
Yeah.
Like you really are, you don't want to get a reputation for saying that, yeah, you'll do this grant, but you're not going to do certain parts of it, or that you're unreliable, or that you said your mission was early childhood, but here you are doing some other weird project that has nothing to do with it. Like, you really want to think of it, even though it's like, nonprofit work isn't thought of in this way a lot of times, but that you're developing a brand almost. Like, what do you want to be known for? What do you want to be an expert in? What do you want people to reach out and collaborate with you on? That's going to have the greatest impact in that area, those values that you're focused on, that mission that you're focused on. Yeah.
And also just to make sure that the people that are funding you, understand that mission and your values and are aligned. Because you don't want to say
Mhm.
yes to a funder that just doesn't get it and then is gonna make you go in the completely opposite direction.
Yeah. Jump through hoops to do
Yeah.
everything that they wanted you to do with the money. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, that's another thing I definitely agree with is that they're going to put you through the ringer when you apply for these grants. They're gonna, you're going to have to do a lot of legwork to write the application itself. But sometimes we've had grants that reached out that wanted to do like a formal interview, either in person or Zoom. They're going to have usually in their RFP, they call it a request for proposal. They're going to want to like have their interests met, I guess. They're going to be pretty upfront and seeing like listing out things that they want covered in the grant. And you're totally right to answer it in the way that aligns with your mission, but also to like flip the tables on them too and say like, hey, these are my values. How do you align with my values? It's not a one-way street. It's not just like I'm coming to you for money based on what you want to fund. I'm telling you what I'm doing, and if you're interested in it, great. But also, you need to uphold these ethical values that I have, doing the work to make sure that this is like a mutually beneficial partnership.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mary, for taking some
Oh,
time to do this, because you are a wealth of knowledge. And like I said, I think um, you guys have really created and trailblazed a very unique model that I think other people can learn from. So thank you for sharing with us. And yeah, just appreciate you and your time and your knowledge.
Yeah, no problem. And if there's people out there listening that are wanting to improve perinatal health and early childhood nutrition, and you're doing that through birth work or nutrition, dietetics, or farming, and you're interested in having a fiscal sponsor or talking one-on-one about what grants might be a good option for you, you're welcome to reach out to myself or to Zach to have a more one-on-one conversation.
And we'll link the Biddy Baby website on the description so that people can get in
Perfect.
contact with you guys. Awesome. Well, thank
Cool.
you.
Awesome. Thanks, Cecilia. It's good talking with you.
You too.